Folks, welcome to a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. Happy Martin Luther King Day 2016 to everybody out there. And it is my honor to bring in one of the most unheralded sonic expanders of music of all time, Don Preston. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you very much for that intro.
Well, when we get through the interview, people are going to be in awe here because it's my job as an interviewer to reveal things or get you to reveal things that you've never talked about before, and you've had quite a you can talk about your career, but it goes way back, and I got to tell you, I was blown away and frankly excited to talk to you about the indigenous learning system that you grew up with, and I wanted you to just riff on the idea of that there were no books, you couldn't transcribe anything, there was no notations on the internet. Cats like Flanagan, Bird, guys like Kenny Burrell, who I've interviewed, Yusef Lateef, the list goes on and on and on. You guys were making up the rules, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Well, to a certain extent. I mean, there were people before us that made up a lot of rules, believe me. But there were still rules that hadn't been made up in terms of, I don't know if you'd call it rules, but standards and ways of doing things. And, I mean, when I wanted to learn, for instance, I at that time I was about 19 or 20, and I was learning Poco Loco by Bud Powell. And there were certain passages that were really difficult to hear on the recording since they were 78 recordings at that time.
Sure.
Unbreakable, whatever they made that stuff out of. I don't know what they made it out of.
Yeah, you can't break it.
No. If you dropped it on the floor, it was gone. That was before vinyl.
Oh, so it was very fragile, actually.
Very.
Interesting.
Extremely fragile. And, but anyhow, so I would go to people like Barry Harris or Tommy Flanagan. Actually, Barry was, he learned a lot more about Bud Powell than anyone else in Detroit. And so he was the one to go to for that, and I did. And he said, well, this goes like this. And then, so that's how I learned some of this stuff. And what you say, there wasn't such you can get off the internet, but you could go to people and talk to them and ask them, certain things that maybe you couldn't hear, but that they were able to hear. Or maybe he even got it from Bud Powell. Who knows,
I want to read you a quote from my interview with Kenny Burrell. He said we were learning more than we realized. He's speaking of growing up in Detroit. Today you can get any notation online, but growing up in Detroit there weren't even the books to transcribe the melodies. We had to do that ourselves. In the process, you begin to learn and understand what's really going on. It takes time to digest what you're transcribing, so you're getting a theory lesson in harmony and melody as you're doing the transcription. And to me, it's like you were part of this region. How did you connect with the black music how did you connect with those cats originally?
Well, I worked hard, practiced a lot, and then I just presented myself and saying, "Do you mind if I play?" And most of the time they were totally open. There was no prejudice going then, at least on their side of it. But there, that was in the background of all the stuff. Although Detroit was pretty. Well, at that time it was, it was segregated. I mean, the blacks lived over there. In fact, in my neighborhood, I lived on 6 Mile Road,
mm-hmm.
and and 8 Mile Road was where the blacks lived on the other side of 8 Mile Road. And that's one of the reasons they made that movie called 8 Mile, or 8 Mile Road, I think it was called.
That's right.
That was an actual thing that existed at that time. And it was scary over there. And it was, maybe it was scary for them where I lived, who knows. But that's the whole thing. I mean, I think fear had a lot to do with segregation or the way people thought about each other. I didn't feel that way, I never did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, for me to go into a black club and sit in and play with black musicians, that was great. I mean, these guys were really great musicians. Why couldn't I want to play with them?
No, okay. So, number one, we all know that fear turns to hate. So that's part of it.
Sure.
Okay, and but when I talk, I've done probably 500 interviews, Don, and cats like Barry Goldberg from Chicago, they heard the music on the radio. Now, this is more blues than jazz, but it was the same kind of deal. They heard black music on the radio, and as white kids growing up in the white neighborhoods. Now, Bloomfield and Butterfield, they grew up in mixed neighborhoods, but Goldberg had to go and find the music. And I want you to talk about, even though you were scared, really the first time before you had ever gigged at any of the black clubs, that time when you just said, screw it, I want to play this music with these guys, and kind of the bravery it took to go, and who you really first connected with, because, Donald Byrd, Pepper Adams, Elvin Jones. I can go on, and Don Preston is now part of that lineage. This is confounding to me. I want you to talk.
It's funny you mentioned Pepper Adams, because he and I worked in a record store together before, and I didn't know he even played.
He never broke out the Barry sax, huh?
Right, of course not. But later on, I would go to a jam session, and mostly black people, but he would be there. He was another person that didn't care, he didn't hang out with the white guys, because if you listen to his playing, it's more black than not.
Right.
and I always thought that my playing was similar to that, but he was ferocious. He was amazing. And so I was very fortunate to be able to play with him and all the other guys that I played with at that time. And I also played with the white groups, not to delineate or anything, but of course that's the way it was then. And there were, the thing about Detroit was you could go almost somewhere like 18 hours a day, any day of the week, and play. And that was one of the reasons why Detroit was so rich in its musical output. Just think of all the people, Milt Jackson, God, you could go on for hours.
It's ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous. And there were these different generations. Yusef Lateef was a generation, or he was years older than Kenny Burrell's generation, but it was like this lineage was so intense. Then also, the idea that John Lee Hooker, the blues was side by side. There was no labels. It was all meshing together. This is the richness of it, Preston. Now, Don, I want to be clear about something, because listen, there are a lot of cats, we're not delineating by people of color or what their skin color looks like. But when you say playing black, does that mean,
Well, it's hard to. That's hard to say what I meant by that, because that may be the wrong way to put that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that he was extremely extremely talented, and he could play that instrument like no one else could. No one. I can't remember anyone ever playing with that ferociousness. That's the word I can come up with. And it was like, cab. I mean, and I think, I wouldn't just say that. I changed that. That's not really black. It was just Pepper Adams,
Right.
And but he always got, I don't know, he always wound up playing with black guys because it just sort of fit. It just fit with their, with what they were doing.
What were they doing? I mean, that's the whole point of it, is that you could talk about, West Coast bop, that was Chet Baker. Those guys could burn. I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is the idea of, this transcending, the music transcends the band, okay? Because the sequencing of the ideas, like you said, is ferocious. When Coltrane was doing his modal period, again, I'm a non-musician, but I'm just trying to get to this idea of the black ethos of just burning. It's just burning music. I mean, that's something that, in my mind, you cannot be taught that. That's when you just sort of let go, listen, let your ego go. But I really want you to talk about it, because I was amazed that you were marinating in this bastion here.
Uh-huh. Well, it just was the way it was. I don't know. I really don't know why it was the way it was. It's just that it seemed to me that there was a difference in the way black people approached the music, and I'll give you like a technical explanation.
That'd be great, yeah.
Well, we mostly know that jazz came out of the early church blues and what have you. It basically came from Africa. When you look at early African music, I would say 95% of it was what we call 6/8 or 12/8.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a lilting way about it, but it was like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. Whereas like common American music was in 4/4 or 3/4, so that's 1 2 3 4. Now you can fit the 12/8 into the 4/4,
right?
By going 1 2 3 2 3 2 2 3 4 2 3, like that. But the difference is that you have the difference between triplets, which is 3 notes in the space of 2, or you have 8 notes and 16th notes. So it's the difference like this, like da 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 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, like that, or 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. So, all right. So now take a song, but like Count Basie,
right?
Little down is it? No, that's not. I figured. Oh, I can't play this keyboard, but
yeah.
Da 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 da. Okay, so that last thing, da da. Now, a person in a classical musician would play it like da 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 da. Okay, like that.
Sure.
But a black person or somebody that's playing jazz in that vernacular, it would be da da da. That would be part of a triplet. It's very subtle.
No, it's not. No, you're nailing it, man. Because it's polyrhythmic in some ways. It's not. It's
not just polyrhythmic. It's a way. See, in the old days, a classical musician could not play jazz because they didn't know how to interpret what was written in 16th notes and eighth notes, it was always written that way. It wasn't written all triplets and everything. It
Right.
was written like you. But when jazz musicians played it, they interpreted it with a triplet in their mind. But the classical musician, he had to play the 16th notes and the eighth notes the way they were, and that doesn't work at all.
You're starting to burn a little bit, Preston. I like it. I'm starting to really get into this. To me, you're attributing this to the lineage. I mean, a lot of people say jazz is a combination of African rhythms and European classical swing or whatever. But
well, it is. It is.
But I guess what I'm hearing, what I hear. I was born in 1978. So at 37 years old, I'm not reliving my past here, okay? What I'm hearing in today's world, set aside the digital music, okay? We're also talking to a genius, Don Preston, who was making music for the 21st century that in 1981 that I still don't think has even come close to in 2015. So we got a ways to go on that. But what I hear now in jazz, it's that it has been classicalized very significantly, as opposed to the gut bucket blues approach of one of the regional bastions was Detroit. There was a visceral quality. The African roots were strong within the music. There was, I mean, and to me, it's so fascinating that I guess that's the idea is that whatever instrument you were working on when you were in high school, you know, can you?
I didn't play. I really didn't play when I was in high school. I mean, I was always playing at home, but as far as playing in a group, I couldn't, and I like at that time I could imitate like George Shearing and I could play some of the songs by Stan Kenton, which those are the things you heard on the radio back then.
Of course.
And Woody Herman, you know, I knew a couple things by him, but I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know. I mean, I could play chord changes, but I didn't know exactly what the fuck I was doing.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so when did you first get up on the bandstand? Who was in that group?
Okay, so what happened is I went into service. And I found myself over in Trieste, Italy. And Trieste at that time was occupied by the United States, part of it, and part England, and part Russian. Now, the Russian part was blocked off. You could not go there. But the English and the American part were open to everybody. And so I was there. I was in the engineers working in heavy equipment. You know, big, you know, like big shovels and all those things.
Were you building? Were you designing it, or were you actually operating that stuff?
Oh no! I was operating. That was my aptitude when they gave me a test. My aptitude was that I could do heavy equipment.
What year? By the way, and this is what year was this?
1950.
Right. So I just for the audience, basically, jazz was a major part of. I mean, the Army was really getting desegregated through jazz. But continue, please.
Oh yeah. There was some great jazz musicians in the Army at that time.
Joe Henderson, all those
like
cats.
Cannonball.
Oh God.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
So I was in the PX, which is an Army store for all of the soldiers, and they have a piano in there. There's like a place you can play chess or you can play the piano, you know. And so I used to go there and play the piano. And this guy walked up to me and he says, "Wow, you play pretty good." He says, "Well, you should try out for the band."
Right.
I said, "What band?" He said, "Well, there's the 98th Army Band is here in Trieste, and we could use somebody like you." And so and the guy who said that his name was Herbert Solomon, who later became known as Herbie Mann.
No way. No way, man.
And
That's
so
awesome.
So I went and auditioned for the band, and I still remember what song they played. They had a big band set up, like a regular jazz big band.
Yes.
And they played Slow Boat to China, and it was in G flat. Now, G flat on the piano is horrendous. It's a very difficult key.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if I didn't know Slow Boat to China, but I had heard it a few times, over the years, and so I sat down and we all started playing, and they had this 6-page of music in front of me in G flat, and so I played along with it, and so afterwards the head warrant officer who was head of the band, he was like the general of us, and so he walked over to me and says, "Well, Don," he says, "I knew you weren't reading the music, but you did such a good job faking it. I'm going to get you in here."
Really?
So he transferred me into the band, and I moved into a room with this other guy. See, the place we were staying in it had been a whorehouse at one time.
Sure.
Which was absolutely perfect for the band.
Right. I mean, the jazz music brothels were very important venues for bebop. Go ahead.
Well, they, it must have been a big whorehouse. If it was a big place, and there was a main room where people would dance and
sure,
hang out, and there was a bar, and then there was a little room with TV, and then there was all these little rooms where they used to go and do what they did. So I was rooming with this guy. His name was Buzz Gardner.
Buzz Gardner.
It was Bunk Gardner's brother.
Right.
And I learned, he was kind of about 3 years older than me, and he turned me on to all the wonderful books that I probably would have read had I stayed in school, and also music too. I was already enthralled with Stravinsky, but he turned me on to Bartok and Schoenberg and Hindemith and Alvin Berg, all of this at that particular time. Really very important people to listen to, Respighi. So I got kind of an education from him, and also I started writing music like crazy. I could write music and go to somebody who played the instrument I was writing for and say, how do you, what's bad on this instrument? What should I do? So I learned orchestration the hard way just by talking to all the guys that played the instruments themselves.
Interesting.
And I later studied orchestration from Walter Piston, by his books, of course, and Rimsky-Korsakov, who was Stravinsky's teacher. And so that's where I got my orchestration from. In fact, right now I'm in the middle of writing a piece, a film score, and it's for full orchestra. So,
I guess
that's where I got all my education about music.
So you would take some of these original compositions and you would play with the Army band. Would you play them in the Army band?
Oh, well, it wasn't just an Army band. It was, like I said, there was a big band there, and within the band, and there were a number of smaller groups that would play, like with Herbie and Buzz and all these other people. There were some really, really good musicians there. One guy, his name was Torch Toro, and we had a little band shell outside in the front yard, and we used to jam out there, and Torch would get up on the roof of the fucking shell and jump and this is without stopping playing. He would jump off of the roof and land on the ground and do a somersault, and then stand up, and he wouldn't drop a note.
Wow.
I never saw anything like. I don't know how he did that without breaking his teeth or whatever. Unbelievable. But anyhow, that was part of the life there. So
when you but this is really so you were not confident enough to go out and play. You played at home before the Army. Then in the Army, you wind up getting connected.
I didn't even know about going out and playing. I just had no idea about it.
Sure, but I want you to talk about. So you just talked about your musical maturation within the Army, the small groups, the quartets, the quintets, the jam sessions, the whorehouses, the big band.
Right.
You come back to Detroit.
And then there was a concert band as well, and we played all kinds of great concert pieces.
Did you travel a lot in Europe? Like, did you go to Germany and play?
Not the band, no.
Yeah.
We only played, but we did go into town, and we would set up and play for the people of Trieste. And that was really exciting, because and I had already played clarinet, and so they had an alto clarinet, so I got a hold of that and started practicing, and I played that, and I also played timpani in the concert band, and all kinds of stuff. I was kind of the odd man, that could pick up something and do it. And whatever they needed me for, I was very happy to do.
Would you consider yourself an idiot savant in some ways?
Well,
okay.
I guess I'm not sure, but yeah, I guess so.
Well, I mean, just the idea that you can pick up an instrument and be competent at it. It shows a certain type of genius. But I guess what I'm getting at is. Because guys like Don Menza, great horn players, they were up in Germany, and he was doing like heavy artillery stuff. He was in that kind of realm, but like you, he found the band, and he wound up being a musician over there, and honing his style and meeting a bunch of cats, and it saved his life essentially. But this was post-war Italy, right? I mean, at this time.
Yeah, I got there late. Well, no, probably early '51. So that was like about 5 years after World War II.
And when you
Maybe,
came,
6 years. 6 years after World War II.
When
World War II ended in 1945.
Sure. It was just during the Reconstruction period. So
yeah.
And
like there was nothing from any of the people. The Italian people were really happy to have us there. In fact, I just went back to Trieste about 3 months ago because they were making a film about the U.S. occupation of Trieste, which everybody felt that was really the highlight of Trieste. It was so great, especially musically, because we used to jam with the people there, the musicians, and they had a radio show we were on a lot, and just all kinds of stuff like that. Pretty amazing.
Did you?
So it was a big deal to them.
You know who? Emil Richards?
Of course, do I know Emil Richards?
I knew you know him, but I'm just saying I've been to Lake Toluca and been at his house and done several interviews with Emil and he was.
Well, he's Italian, His real name was Radiocchio or something similar to that.
Well, no, Preston. I mean, the reason I bring it up is because he went with, I think, Kenton's band after we annihilated Japan, and just doing relentless big band tours up and down, Japan, and
really,
big time, yeah, and I just want to get your opinion. I mean, because cats like Johnny Griffin, Dexter Gordon, all those cats. There was that huge exodus in the '70s of a lot of the finest jazz musicians to Europe, just saying that they were sick and tired of the cultural bias that they kept running into in the United States. And I wonder your opinion about the European, if the appreciation for melodic improvisation, i.e. jazz, really was fostered in Japan and in Europe in that post-World War II period.
Well, yeah, and there were, what I remember is that there were a group of Swedish musicians. The piano player's name was Bent Hallberg.
Right.
And in fact, he wrote a song, Dear Old Stockholm, that I think Miles played. And
That's so huge. I can't believe that.
and so, yeah, there was like this big, and they were really good, really good musicians, and that had, really cool approach to music. And also a bunch of black guys migrated to Sweden and Norway, whatever, because, first of all, there was no prejudice there whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And they were hooking up with gorgeous blonde girls, I mean, who wouldn't?
Dude, the Mormon girls are huge. Yeah, I mean, those guys, there's the most beautiful Nordic, like blonde hair, blue eyed girls. How could you resist that?
Yeah. And so it was, there were a bunch of jazz clubs in various places, Oslo and Stockholm. So it was a good thing. I mean, it was like helping to spread jazz in through Europe and everything, and it didn't take much. I mean, there were great musicians, and the people loved it.
Well, that's what I'm getting at is that this idea where these guys who left the States in the 70s, I'm trying to figure out if Europe already had a real foundational love of improvisational music, jazz, before World War II, or if that music exploded there as the world music after the war was over, and that's really what took hold. Because, to me, it was Goodwill. This was the Goodwill tours. Emil was on the Goodwill tour with Stan Kenton after we dropped a nuclear bomb. And so I'm not trying to ask, was there jazz in Europe before? It's just, maybe it's hard for you to have some perspective on it, but it seems to me like that the music that was made here, the art form that was created in the States that we brought there, seemed to create not just goodwill, but I've heard people say it before, jazz was created here, but it's consumed in Europe, and that holds up more true today than ever. There's no live jazz clubs anymore. I think in Southern California there might be one club. Well,
that's not quite true. I mean, there's a bunch. I mean, there's two. What the hell are they called? They're Japanese. Come to think of it.
Well, no. Let's break it down because between, you could go to Dante's, and you could go to Shelley's Manhole. I mean, dude, there were. Anyway, here's
a few more. Yeah.
I mean, other than Catalina's, I don't really know about. Again, I'm just in my own bubble in Tucson. But but this is the story that I want from Don Preston is that you get back to Detroit, and it's at the really bebop. The language of bebop was growing. Please tell me.
Well, there was one other aspect that I didn't.
Go ahead, please.
And that was when I was one night or one day, I took this Benzedrine inhaler in Italy, and they were 3 times stronger than the American inhalers. If you wanted to make comparisons. Anyhow, the thing was, and we were living in this what used to be a whorehouse, as I said, but it was behind the castle grounds. There's an incredible white castle right right on the Adriatic Sea. And so I just walked from our house all the way into Trieste, which was 8 miles. And I walked by a little bar, and there were some guys playing in there, and I noticed a bass leaning against the wall.
Right.
So I went in and I said, I pointed the bass, and then they said, yeah, come on up. And, and so I went up there, and I think I played for about 4 hours on the bass. Never touched one before.
Oh, my gosh. Unbelievable.
And, well,
oh, my God.
Break it down, it's not that complicated.
Do not say that. Don't say that. Don't say that. For you, maybe. But go ahead, continue.
Well, I'm just telling you how I thought about it.
Sure.
Because it's just 4 strings, and so you only have, even if you played one string, and you could still get by. But I played, with them, and they were playing some songs I recognized, and stuff, and I got through, and I walked all the way back to our barracks, and after that, because we had like 3 basses that we used for the concert band. So I used to get those basses, and I'd take it up to the room and figure it out. I had to figure out, well, okay, so now we got 4 strings, and where can I put my fingers, and there wasn't anybody there that, I think I did there was a bass player in the band, and I talked to him and asked him, how it worked and everything. So I started practicing and practicing and practicing. And I started playing with various groups that were in the band. And so when I got back to Detroit, you're thinking, and I went into where Elvin and Yusuf Lateef and the bass player was what was his name?
Ron Carter or
Ollie Jackson, who was Milt Jackson's brother.
Ollie Jackson. This is great.
Yeah.
All right, so they had a trio or something?
And so I asked him if I could fit in on bass. And that's the group with Elvin Jones. And I sat in with him. And I played like 3 sets.
Preston, this is blowing my mind. This is so ridiculously. But I want to be clear. You did not go to the black clubs pre-Army. This was after you came back.
Right.
And did you didn't know Elvin before you went to the Army?
Oh no, not at all.
So you get back to Detroit with a lot more vocabulary, a lot more knowledge, a lot more confidence. Yeah. Tell me about that time. How did you what club? Tell me about that night when you decided to go. I mean, that to me is the coolest story ever.
Well, given the fact that it was, let me see, it was at least 63 years ago. Well, 60,
yeah, at least, yeah, right,
ago.
Right.
I do remember, well, first of all, it was called the West End Cafe.
Mm.
And it was an after hours, they didn't have music during, it was like a restaurant. And so, like at 2 a.m, Yusuf would take his band, which was Tommy Flanagan, Elvin Jones, and Ollie Jackson. So I went there and I just said, "Can I sit in?" And Ollie was tired. He'd been working for 5 hours already.
Unbelievable. Yeah, he needed a break.
And so, right. And so I sat in. Now, the thing that blew my mind was that they let me play the next set. So I said, well, gosh, I must be doing something right, because I know Elvin Jones is going to put up with that.
I mean,
and
this is classic. This is so classic.
And I did that for 2 years. and I'm finally, like I would come in and Ollie would just say, "Hey, Don, take over." That was how it was, and nobody cared.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. There was no real territorial thing. I mean, Ollie was very secure with it. I mean, they were getting off on the fact that you were.
They just wanted somebody that could play.
Yeah, and you had the nuts.
And I could play.
Yeah, I mean, were they breaking out like original tunes on the spot, or were you basically playing standard songbook stuff?
It was they didn't have song books at the time.
Yeah, again, I just totally contradicted what I was talking about before. They had no books, so there was nothing. Yeah,
but everyone knew the jazz, what we would call jazz standards today, and most of them came from stuff Miles was playing, and of course Yusuf he was a great writer. He wrote some great songs, and I got to learn some of those songs as well, So, he didn't feel that he couldn't. He felt like he could play some of his songs if I were playing bass.
Could you talk to my generation and younger generations about the nuanced and burning qualities of Elvin as a drummer? I mean, you literally were. I mean, because I've done so much. I've interviewed Airto, and Airto was talking about Elvin was kind of a scary looking guy. He had these big white teeth, and you have to go up and talk to him. But he was the friendliest guy in the world. But I mean,
oh, he was such a sweet person. I mean, he was great.
But yet there was let's not confuse the fact that he played like a warrior. And I want that peaceful warrior definition from bass player Don Preston, who played for 3 years with Elvin Jones in the late 50s.
Well, it's like this. I mean, Elvin didn't really change his style much because he was already pretty far out there, like with all the polyrhythms he was doing. But one of the things that I found extremely bizarre was the fact that he's playing these different rhythms, and really complicated rhythms, not with his left foot and his right foot. The bass drum wasn't playing 4/4. I don't know what it was. But most of it was all in 6/8. All his rhythms were like 6/8.
Right.
And he was playing, stuff on the snare drum and a lot of drummers do that, but his stuff was a little more complicated. And not only was he doing all that, but he was also singing a different rhythm with his voice. So that's the thing that got me.
He was actually
four different rhythms with each member of your body, and still sing a different rhythm than you were playing. I couldn't believe it.
He was vocalizing. You're saying he was. You're saying he was. He was vocalizing.
Sorry.
He was vocalizing.
Yeah.
But
he wasn't singing. He was like making sounds, rhythmic sounds, and it was because. But the other thing about Elvin is that he was very, very knowledgeable about music. One time this black guy sat in on piano, and we were playing some fucking ridiculous tempo, and it was probably like All the Things You Are or something like that.
Right.
And all of a sudden Elvin's like leaning over toward the piano player, and he's going, B minor 7, A flat 7, A third, and he's like calling these changes out at this ridiculous tempo in order to let the piano player know what to play. And he's calling them out like a bar ahead of time, so he would have time to play it. I mean, fuck.
Right. I mean that.
On the radio now.
That is so insane. I mean that's a natural gift of But again, it goes back to what you were talking about. Elvin was channeling those indigenous African rhythms, the 6/8 and the 12/8.
Yeah.
And he was putting the triplets.
Totally.
You know, I just interviewed a venerable bass player from New York, this guy named Bill Crow, and he was talking about, I asked him, I said, I've talked to Ron Tutt, the drummer, about this too, was there ever a musical style that really humbled you to the point where you had to go back and woodshed? For Tutt, it was when reggae came in. He was infatuated with the beats on the 1 and 3 instead of the 2 and 4. But with Crow, as a bass player, he moved to New York in 1950, and he was getting by okay. But then he got a gig with Jerry Mulligan's Sextet, and his fingers were not trained in the upper register of the bass. He needed to go and seek out a teacher. And
no one was back in those days.
Say again?
Paul Chambers with Miles, he rarely goes beyond the second position on the bass. Right. But you're telling me that no matter what kind of you never needed. Did you ever need to go when you were playing those gigs? I mean, clearly the education was unquantifiable on the bandstand, but did you ever feel like, just taking the bass for instance? Did you ever feel like there was a part where you just were like, I need to consult, I need to get some lessons? No, because bass wasn't my instrument.
Preston is out of. You're out of control. You're out of control.
That was true. I was, my favorite bass player was
Hey Don, hold on 1 second. Take your time and think about it. Hold on, all right?
Okay.
Yeah.
What's his name?
All right, we're back.
Okay.
So I just am sort of.
I was about to tell you my favorite bass player, and I can't think of his name. He played with Oscar Peterson for years and years.
Oh, Niles Ørsted Peterson.
No. No.
Ray Brown.
Yeah, Ray Brown. Now, if you listen to Ray, he had the greatest sound. I think his fingers were about 10 inches long. But he rarely went out of second position on bass. Maybe it was some solos, but it was only Scott LaFaro. When he started playing, everybody said, "Whoa, you could play the bass like up there and play like these wild solos."
That's right.
And so he opened a lot of people's ears. And today, I bought a bass about 6 years ago, and I had to sell it. I thought, I'm never, ever going to play like anything close to what people are playing now, because it's way, way more than anybody played back then.
Yeah, but that's, in essence, that's, the bass as you lock the groove, or you.
Oh, well, of course.
You're not. The idea that you're.
That I could do.
Yeah, that mentality of like, the mentality of showing off your chops, but that's neither here nor there. To me, it's like you were. Can you talk about the most sort of like, funky gig, in the sense like it wasn't a jazz gig? Did you ever wind up, in a folk setting, or with any of the blues cats playing just straight blues? Because like you said before, with a bass.
No, you know what?
Yeah.
There's one thing that we had, back then from that time on, there was always these jobs that people would get you to do. And besides, you had to pay your rent too, They're called society jobs. And and there was like a whole genre of music called society music. And it was all these things like tie a yellow ribbon and, oh God, geez, I wish I could think of some of them. And basically the music was, what we called back then was two-beat music.
Right.
And that was like the accent was the bass and the drums, and everybody played on 1 and 3. And that really, and of course, forget triplets. That's, you couldn't put those in there; you'd get fired. So it was like basically designed for the average businessman,
right?
And what they knew about music, which was virtually nothing, but
you had to make it palatable for them.
That was the music you had to play for those people, and that generally was, here's what the way it worked. You'd go to a club where they had jam sessions, and you go there because you love to play jazz, and that's what everybody did, and you like to hear other people and see what they did. Ornette Coleman would be there, and all kinds of people. And then you'd give people your business card, because that was one way you had of networking and letting them know who you are, and if they liked the way you played, they'd call you and say, yeah, I got this job on the weekend, blah, 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 and everything. And it was generally playing that kind of music, and that was probably from 1957 until 1967. And those things don't exist anymore, of course. And when they do play for businessmen like that, it's generally rock and roll and, that kind of thing.
Jazz was the popular music at that time, so...
No. I would say it was unpopular.
Phil Woods told me, after World War II, the world exploded with joy, and the music of that joy was jazz. So, it was...
Oh, sure. And you could go over to Europe and make a living, or, if you're famous, you have no problem at all. That's where I go right now. I've been going over to Europe for 10 years now with my group called the Grandmothers of Invention. And it just, that's where the money is, because in the United States,
yeah.
Well, first of all, in the United States, people don't even remember who we are.
Well, no, this is what I was talking about. Even though the music was created here, it's consumed in Europe, and you're just telling me that's what it is.
Yeah.
But
the Mothers were all kind of. I always thought the Mothers was a jazz group with a rock drummer.
Absolutely, and then there was this. I think the other thing that is vexing to me. I talked to people who actually were able to go and see you guys, see the Mothers, was just this comedy angle too.
Sure, and I still do that too.
I transcribed something from George Duke last night where he was talking about Jean-Luc Ponty refusing, even though I think he said he considered Frank a genius in his own way. Jean-Luc thought his music was interesting, and there would be a point where Zappa would say, all right, I want you to play this, da 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 da, and then on the last lick, I want you to kick your right leg up and then come down on that last one. And he would not. Ponty would not do it. He would not do it. And
well, that's true, and he's a great violinist and everything. But when the early band was playing, Zappa never told anyone to do any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we did it. and we did it naturally, and we just, all these things like that, we just did them. And then so when Zappa got a new band, he was wanted them to do that too, and they wouldn't do it. Not just John Luke, probably a bunch of people.
Good.
And even when they did do it, they were doing it because they were told to do it, and it wasn't real.
Before we jump too far ahead, because we're gonna have to do a part two. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here with Don Preston, but
Okay.
he's a very heavy cat. But at the end of the day, can you tell me the demarcation point? Forget the bass, but I'm talking more about piano keyboards.
Oh, sure.
Okay, you can borrow and steal. Everybody does. They take from their best, whether it's classical or jazz. You can borrow and but ultimately you have to. The key to music, in my mind, or being an individualist as a musician, is to develop your own voice, your own sound. And I'm just trying to figure out with you if there was a demarcation point in your life when you realized, whether it was because you were with a certain band leader or just on your own, where you just realized, I really want to get comfortable, I need to develop my own sound. Was there a period of time when you can point to that?
Say that last sentence again. I need to my own what?
No, was there a demarcation point in your career where you can honestly say you were consciously searching for your own individual sound?
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer.
Yeah, this is the Jake Feinberg show,
Like it changes from day to day, for one thing, and also I'm a professional musician, if you want to use that term. If you call me on the phone and you have a really interesting job, I'll probably do it. It's just and that's what happens. People call me, and then, like I was in the supermarket the other day, and this guy called me and says, "I want you to do the score for my film." Oh, okay, and it just so happened that his house was between the supermarket and my house. And so I just went to his house, and we went up, and I looked at the film, and I said, "Cool, it looks good." So that's what I'm doing right now, and that's what I do. I do have my own agenda, and it's not the grandmothers. I consider the grandmothers to be a ways and means of making a living, getting some of the money I never got from Zappa, and and also it's a lot of fun because the music is great, and I enjoy playing it a lot. But when it comes to my own music and my own what I want to do, what I want to create, that has to do with a lot of more integrity as a musician, and also in keeping with what I listen to, and trying to emulate some of that, and I'm doing music that's as I told Coltrane one time, cutting edge, because you have to make music up to the moment of where it is, and that's basically what I try to do. Is I try to create music as far as I can go, as far as anybody can, and I'm not worried about the listener at all.
Right, I love it.
I just want to create music that is as far developed as that I know myself, and I always try to keep abreast of whatever is new. I think that's for me, it's extremely important. it's almost like music has an effect on all the other fields of life, and that it is music is one of the most, I should say, unconscious driving forces that other people are inspired to create something new themselves in whatever field they're in. So there you have it.
Wow, you just nailed it. You nailed it, man. Did you ever play with Train?
No, I didn't. But one night I was living in Detroit, and he came to Detroit, and because I knew Elvin, I said, I need to talk to Coltrane, and
Yeah.
he said, well, he's right over there banging his horn.
Yeah, right, practicing.
And I went over and talked to him, and I said something to the effect of, you realize, of course, that you are the most looked up to tenor saxophone player in the world. He said, what? No. He was surprised.
Really?
Very surprised. And I said, well, the problem with that is that you've been playing the same way for the last 15 years, and it's up to the musician. And I told him just what I told you is, I said, look, if you look at the harmonic scale of any note, where it's divided in half, like the string on a guitar, if you put your finger in the middle of the string, you'll hear the first harmonic. You put your finger in the middle of that, between that and the end, that's the second harmonic. And same, and then the middle of that is the third harmonic and the fourth harmonic, so on and so forth. Music has developed through the harmonic scale. Beethoven or Bach, he was working on the second harmonic, and then you can see how music has progressed through the harmonic scale all the way up till now. And every composer of classical music has taken that extra step, gone that extra step in order to create the next new thing.
Right.
And I said, and that's up to you too. You have to do that too in your playing, and your, whatever you create. So a lot of people hate me for this because it was right after that he completely changed his playing.
Was that when he went to the modal period?
Yes.
You
after the modal period?
What was after the modal period?
He started playing, getting really out.
I cannot believe that this was the Preston.
Yeah, I mean,
this pep talk.
I think of A Love Supreme.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
But after that, he went into this really out stuff. This not out the way jazz musicians do that now, but he just changed his playing. You can hear it. It's really different.
What album would you point to with? Because I guess no, because I really thought that he had that Love Supreme language was kind of really right before he passed away, and I didn't know he had anything. He added more.
Really?
I'm not. Listen, I'm more of a Don Preston, I'm more of like an unsung cat. I don't listen to the deities, the gods. I listen.
Well, I don't either. I just remember hearing stuff a long time ago, and I didn't remember what it was or where it was from.
Sure.
I just noted to myself that that does sound different.
Do you know Dr. Patrick Gleason?
Of course I know Pat. We worked on Apocalypse Now together.
Oh my God! I was out in Southern Cali at Preston's abode, and we've done about 2 or 3 interviews, but I just, Don, I want to say it's really a trip. It's really a trip and an honor to connect with you, man. And I would I would really like just to request two things from you. One is an email so I can send you not only this interview, but I can send you some other things that I think you really get a kick out of, excerpts of my interviews and things like that. And then friend me on Facebook, because that's, as being a one-man band and being completely free and outside of mainstream corporate media, I'm disseminating all these powerful stories from everybody. I've done 2-hour-long interviews with Bill Cosby. I've done 4 interviews with Billy Cobb. I mean, I'm not fucking around. And so when the stories you've told today are going to be blasted all over the universe, and well,
let me say this.
Yeah.
My friends I'm at the max, at least for being an individual. You put yourself in there.
Right.
They only allow you 5,000 friends.
Oh, you're at the max. Oh, you're at the max. Okay. No, I mean, right. It's okay. I'm just saying you're gonna. I tagged you this morning. If you do the @ sign and then the name, I said I'm looking forward to speaking to Don Preston. Great music for Martin Luther King Day in the 21st century. But it's okay. I'm just saying that I have found a very creative way of disseminating stories, information, wisdom, philosophy that some people have heard them, but a lot of people there are stories being told. But I have the ability to get these cats to tell stories they've never told before, and so it's resonating with an older population than myself, a different generation of avid fans, and I also have a huge amount of credibility within the musicians. A couple of grandmothers, I believe, as well. Napoleon Brock, I think he's part of the grandmothers. Is that right?
Not now.
Not now. But,
he quit.
He quit, okay. But everybody from Dr. Patrick Gleason, David Rubinson, Jimmy Heath, it's been all over the place. But, it's cats like you that are completely vexing and awesome to me. The idea that, everybody wants to talk, and we'll do this in part 2, but, we can talk about your commercial career when you got on the map and went out to California, but there was nothing that could possibly have helped you more in your foundational learning. Obviously, the Army, but also just the bastion of regionalism of Detroit before full interconnection, because every region in this country had its own individual sound, and it really was. It's amazing, and really is amazing. So it is esoteric. What I'm doing is definitely extraterrestrial, but in many ways, people like us, geniuses, do that kind of stuff. So I'm just glad that we were able to connect.